I do think there was signs that I was gender fluid even as a kid who did not know that I was, who was raised around other transgender people, but because my experience of my dysphoria and of also just my trans experience was so very different from both the cis kids and the other trans kids around me, that I did not know I was trans, that I think that, and also I wasn't a very introspective child either. I wasn't very in contact with my emotions. I wasn't very in contact with myself. There's a lot of reasons for that. The primary reason is because I was in a chronic state of dissociation, because I have dissociative identity disorder, and so in childhood and my teen years, I was hyper dissociated to the point where I was not really consciously in contact with myself. I tried to be as dissociated as possible because of the abuse that I was experiencing in my home life. But I will say that there's definite signs looking back that I was a trans child. And there's signs looking back that I was transmasculine, non-binary, or gender fluid. I use the labels of gender fluid trans man, denoting that I fluctuate between being a trans man to being non-binary, and that is my experience of gender fluidity for me. Among these signs were that as soon as puberty hit, literally as soon as puberty hit, for me it hit around 12, is when it really started, I feel like, to be noticeable, is I remember distinctly in 8th grade, in 7th and 8th grades, but predominantly it was kicking in 8th grade, feeling like I was really, really, really upset that only some girls could grow mustaches or facial hair, or only some girls can grow beards. Because I knew it was possible. Like, I did know that there are rare cases where some girls do grow facial hair or mustaches or beards, and there are some who keep them. And I knew that some women do have beards, but I also knew that I was not one of those girls. And so for me, around 12, I knew I wanted a beard really badly, and I knew that I wanted facial hair, and that I was almost sort of like dreamily excited by the prospect of facial hair and getting like muscle strength and other things that would have been starting to happen to the boys around me. And I felt like that is really what I wanted, but it wasn't in my mind. Like, I didn't know I was a boy, and I didn't know that I could have that. It was just sort of, I really, really want this thing, and I'm upset that it's not happening to me, but it's happening to people around me. Or that I really want certain weight distribution that I'm noticing happening to the boys around me, but it's not happening to me. And I knew I was upset by this, and I knew that I was in pain to the point of, like, I was in such severe pain with the changes my body was undergoing to the point of being suicidal as a 12-year-old, because something was different. I knew something was different, and I didn't know what it was. I didn't know it was dysphoria. And it also wasn't just dysphoria contributing to my suicidality or the pain I was experiencing as a 12-year-old. As a DID system, the other part of why I was suicidal as a 12-year-old was because I was being abused by my dad. And that's why I have DID. That's why I have CPTSD. But at that time, I remember I would listen on an MP3 player that was like a 90s MP3 player. And this was back in 2012. And I would listen on my 90s MP3 player to an Australian band called The Beards. And I would just listen to this band on repeat before and after classes. And I would just, like, almost religiously bump The Beards music. And I loved it. I loved it so much. And I would just, like, fantasize about having a beard and how much I want to have a beard. And I would often wear fake beards. Even then, I was already starting to, like, with makeup, paint on a beard for myself, something I still do. And I just remember that as a kid, I knew that when I tried to imagine a future for myself as an adult, I couldn't imagine one. And it wasn't just that I couldn't imagine myself as a woman, I couldn't imagine myself as an adult at all. I even by that point did not think I would live to adulthood. I really didn't. I truly kind of thought that I would die before graduating high school. I did not think I would live past high school. And I'm not exactly sure entirely why I didn't think I would live past high school. I think part of it was I was an extremely suicidal child who was undergoing familial abuse and other things, and was experiencing neglect and other factors that just made it really difficult to envision myself really growing up. But the other part is I didn't want to grow up. I was experiencing pain from my puberty and these changes that I didn't understand and that I did not want and that I did not like. And part of me handled that was, well, if I just don't grow up, then it won't be painful. If I don't grow up, then these changes my body is going through won't affect me. So part of how a couple of my headmates chose to handle going through puberty was to deny it. And I still have a couple DID headmates who, these are the only two headmates in my entire DID system who are femme presenting. And I believe it's because they are the same parts of me that, in response to the puberty and the pain that our body was going through, decided that, well, if we don't grow, if we stop growing, we'll be okay. So there's a couple headmates. There's one who's maybe around 12, and there's another who's maybe around 14. And I have other headmates as well who are in that age range. But these littles of my system, they're the only femme-presenting littles. And they're also the only femme-presenting alters of my DID system. And I think it's because in their mind, well, if they just stay young where they don't have to deal with those, if in their mind, I think their response to the changes and the pain we were undergoing was to try and stay but in a state before that, which I know that might be a bit confusing, but I think that's part of why those headmates present the way they do. And so I remember that when, at some point in my teens, when I began to imagine, well, what if I was like a bearded lady? Or what if I had just like a beard as an adult? Like, what if I still had like breasts and things, but I just had a beard as an adult? And that's when I started to kind of be able to imagine myself reaching adulthood. When I imagined, well, what if I did have a beard? What if I was one of the lucky few who gets a beard? And I was like, well, then I could maybe imagine myself as an adult, or I could kind of see that. And I started to sort of envision what I could look like. And then I think that when I really came out as trans was after being diagnosed with autism. So I was diagnosed with autism at 20. That led to unmasking a lot of things, including my gender. I came out as non-binary at 21. I came out as a trans man at 22. I was then disowned a couple months into my social transition, and my dad could just point to my other siblings who were also transgender and be like, I'm not transphobic. I raised these two trans kids. I helped them while he was torturing me and threw me away. But yeah, and then I think that it is very complicated growing up being trans, and it's also very painful, or at least it was for me, but I'm thankful to have accepted now, and I'm also thankful for the labels that I now have of genderfluid trans man, because I feel like, although that is multiple labels, it denotes where I fall, the range I fall into, and the range for me is I fluctuate between feeling non-binary to feeling solidly that is a man. And that is in large part because of my autism and DID and how my autism and DID affects me. And I think that I'm thankful to have made it to adulthood now. I'm 25. I genuinely, truly did not believe I would live to be 25. I distinctly know that even as a 12-year-old, I thought I would die. I thought I would commit suicide before I made it this far. So I'm really fucking thankful that not only have I made it to 25, but I am not suicidal anymore. And that's because the people who made me feel like that, I no longer have anything to do with.